Thanks so much, Megan, and thanks again to the Stone Soup Group for having us here today, and especially for this focus on siblings. For those of you who were with us earlier, thanks for sticking around and coming back. Hopefully you learned a lot and you're eager to learn more about siblings and you to hear from our real experts here in the room, who are all of these amazing siblings who join me here on screen. As I said earlier, I honestly believe that hearing directly from adult siblings is one of the most powerful ways to really understand sibling experiences. And so I'm really, really grateful to all of our panelists here today for being here and sharing their stories. We are going to be together for 90 minutes. Is that correct? Yes, 90 minutes. You guys are going to be so surprised at how quickly it goes by. So I'm going to get started and jump right in. And I would love first to just remind our listeners and our viewers that it takes a lot of courage to come up here and sort of share your story. And so I want to be mindful of the fact that all of us have different experiences and different perspectives, and just remind everyone to be respectful of those differences. I think this is a group that I don't really have to say that, but I always like to put it out there, and that we really will honor each other's experiences and truths in this space. So thank you for being a wonderful audience. And if you guys have questions that come up, by the way, we're going to have some time at the end for Q&A. I'm going to start by asking some questions of our panelists, and save your questions for the end. We're going to have time to do that. And I want to make sure that you guys get all of your questions answered by our experts here. So if you want to type those questions into the chat, if that's actually, I think that's what we're going to have to do in this webinar format now that I recall. Feel free to put those into the chat and we can make sure that your questions are addressed. But first, I would like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves. So if you could tell us your name, that should be the easy part, your name and where you live, and what you do during the day, and then one thing that you'd like to do for fun. So your name, where you live, what you do during the day, and one thing that you like to do for fun. And shall we start with Katie, and then you can pass the baton?
Sure. I'm Katie Jones. I am in Anchorage on Denina Land. I'm a parent navigator at Stone Soup Group. I've been in the field for 7 years now, supporting people who have disabilities and their families. One thing for fun, well, I just bought a kayak, so I'm just waiting for the ice to melt so that I can go kayaking this summer.
Nice.
Yeah.
When will that happen there? When will you be able to go out in that kayak?
Someday. Maybe a month or so.
Okay. All right. So not that dissimilar to here.
Mid to late May. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay, Katie, you can pass the baton to the next panelist.
Well, pass it to Callie.
Hi, I'm Callie. I live in Anchorage as well. And something I like to do for fun is a lot of things, but I really like to play games with my friends, just, video games, any kind, really.
Thank you, Callie. And Callie, what do you do during the day?
What do I do during the day? I work part-time at a warehouse as well as a full-time student at UAA as well. And I do a direct support professional with Hope Community Resources.
Wow. All right. So a lot of balls in the air, juggling a lot. Yeah. What are you studying in school?
I'm studying psychology. I have a few careers I'm looking into, counseling or specifically with younger children. With my background, I think would be a really interesting perspective to take into that field.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you so much, Callie. Who are you passing the baton off to?
I don't know anybody, so I'll pass it off to Kimra. Is that how you say your name?
Yes.
Awesome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kimra. I live in Fairbanks, Alaska. I am a manager full-time, but a guardian of my special needs sibling. So with that, I also do part-time work as a direct support professional. To do for fun, I like to hang out with my sister, and we do anything from painting, walking our dog, or watching her ice skate.
The dog?
Yeah, we walk our dog.
Oh, fascinating. I guess if you live in Alaska and you're a dog, you have to learn how to ice skate, right? Very impressive. My dog would be very jealous. Thank you, Kimra. Who would you like to pass the baton to?
I will pass it to Ben.
All right, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Allison. I got unmuted there. So I am in Wasilla, Alaska. During the day, I am a CPA. So I'm actually Stone Soup Group's auditor. I do a lot of financial statement audits and single audits to organizations that receive state and federal funding. So that's how I came in contact with Stone Soup Group. For fun, I have 5 kids, and we play a lot of board games at my house, and it's a lot of fun. So
I bet you do. How old are the kids in age range?
So I have a 13-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old boy, 7-year-old twins that are boy-girl twins, and then the youngest is 7 weeks, and he is a joy. So we got quite the spread.
So he's probably not playing the board games. So like, I'm trying to think of what would be a good game for all those age ranges. Like Monopoly, are we talking about here?
We play, let's see, for the younger ones, it's more card games with like the Uno or similar type games like that. The older ones, we play Acquire, which is kind of like a Monopoly style game, and other card games that go along with it. But yeah, Ticket to Ride, things like that.
So fun. Thank you for sharing that, Ben. It was very popular in our house as well. Who would you like to pass it on? Do you just have one choice, I think, right?
Yeah, I guess whoever my last choice is that Lisa?
We saved the best for last, Lisa.
Oh,
Kara too.
Hi, thank you all. So Lisa Deemer, and I'm in Anchorage on Denai land. I work as communications manager for Rasmussen Foundation, which is the largest private funder in Alaska, a family foundation. And for fun, I the outdoors in Alaska doing all kinds of different things. Very jealous of Katie and her kayak. And I like to hike, cross-country ski, just be outdoors.
Thank you, Lisa. And you know what? We saved the 2 best for last because we can't forget about Kara there.
I was wondering, Kara.
Okay, hi everybody. So I'm Kara, and I live in Anchorage. And what I do during the day for work, I work with Senior and Disability Services, State of Alaska, and I also do a lot of fun stuff with the family. I have 2 adult boys who experience autism. I take care of them each day, and we do all sorts of things like each day, like Zoom school and activities. And I like to paint and do art. My older son really likes to do art. And I also have my brother over for fun. My brother experiences intellectual developmental disability. And he's my younger brother. He lives here in Anchorage in a group home, and I'm guardian for all 3. And, that's it. That's me.
Full. Very full plate. Thank you, Kara. Thank you all. I'd love to ask you now about your siblings. And Kara, you just mentioned that you have a brother with an intellectual disability. So I'm going to ask everyone, and Kara, you can kick us off because you started. So like, how old is your sibling, and what is the family constellation? So are they older or younger than you? You don't have to tell us how old any of you are, but how old your sibling is. If there's a name for what they have, intellectual disability, or if they have like some other kind of diagnosis, What do they do during the day? So what does their kind of daily situation look like? So Kara, do you want to tell us more about your brother?
Yeah, sure. My brother's name is Brian. He's my younger brother. We're all nice and old. And so I don't know. I don't want to be like whoever's in our age range, but let's just say over 50.
Okay, so
We're all
but he's your younger brother, like in
yeah,
terms of the
he's
family
younger.
constellation.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And he has different diagnoses. Like back in the day, they didn't really invent autism yet, but I'm pretty sure he has that. He does have intellectual developmental disability, which of course they called different things way back in the day. And he has what they call Noonan syndrome. Noonan, it's a doctor and it's a lady doctor, so it's pretty cool. She discovered a syndrome, which is like Down syndrome, sort of, and it has different physical disability that goes, or physical attributes, if you will, that goes along with developmental delay. And that's it. And what does he do during the day? He goes to work. He works at the Alaska Rock Gym, and he enjoys that. Of course, he doesn't climb, but he does like a lot of the cleaning and sorting of the equipment. He can get it all together and just keep it neat for everybody. He does his own, shopping for his food, and of course with assistance. He'll do that. He hangs out with his one housemate, and he has like a lot of different puzzles and stuff. He likes to watch videos. He's a big Star Trek fan. He's like a total Trekkie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's a daily thing, special activities. He likes to go camping and stuff and come over to visit and stuff, but that's not every day. He does come over and visit, but of course not every day, especially not this past year or so.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it sounds like he lives in his own apartment. He has a roommate.
He lives in a group home, and he has
group home,
one
sorry.
housemate. Yeah, one housemate right now, and he has his staff. So I'm sure he just they interact quite a bit. Staff is super, super nice there. They do things out. He goes out for coffee, and he's goes and shops for his own clothes and stuff. And he gets assisted with staff all the time, though.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Kara. Ben, how about you? Do you want to share about who is your sibling?
Sure. My older brother, Brad, he is 7 years older than I am. He is the oldest. I'm the youngest. So there's 4 of us in my family. I have the second oldest is another brother, and then a sister in between me and him. And we're all, 2.5 years apart. He is intellectually challenged and disabled, no physical disabilities. During the day, he goes to, he kind of alternates his schedules. And I think right now his schedule is he's working 3 days a week and then goes to a developmental workshop 2 days a week. He lives in Idaho. I'm originally from Idaho. He still lives in Idaho with my mom and dad. They are aging, and so we're kind of in that area where we're trying to figure out what's going to go on in the next few years when my mom and dad are no longer with us, or no longer able to take care of him, or they can't take care of themselves, let alone take care of him. So we're kind of in that. My siblings and I are kind of in that phase right now where we're having those preliminary discussions about what to do next.
Yeah, those are fun discussions, huh? I mean, I'm being kind of. Those are hard conversations to have, and a lot of families don't have them for that reason. So, but it's good you guys have started to talk about that as a family.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's been interesting. We've had this discussion, and I attended I watched the earlier webinar, and so I've had this discussion. You mentioned earlier, like, even as young children, we were having that discussion, but not realizing, there's a lot of time between when you're little and when that's got to happen. And so it's interesting. And I think, that kind of conversation with your kids is like, there's a lot of time to decide, and a lot of things can go on between now and then. We don't have to put anything in stone. And kind of that was kind of, interesting to hear from your perspective and other things. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out too, just the importance of, you know, having that being ongoing conversation in an age appropriate way that, this isn't happening
Mhm.
tomorrow. And also, I think one of the reasons that parents don't often start that conversation, besides the fact that it's like, I don't really want to talk about a time when I'm not going to be here anymore, but
Right.
the fear of like, well, we have to put together this concrete plan, and what if something changes, and that it's a fluid, ongoing process, right? Like there's a plan A and a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, and then right, if we think about the past year with COVID, like all of our plans just went out the window, right? Like nobody could have anticipated what this past year was like. So yes, thank you for articulating that, the importance of making sure that future planning is flexible, but also like age appropriate. And if you're talking to a 10-year-old there's like a lot of decades in between, hopefully, before, any of this comes to fruition, but how great, and to your parents' credit, that they, started having those conversations with you. Kimra, how about you? Do you want to share with us who your sibling is?
She just walked in from work, so.
Perfect timing.
My sister, so during the day, she just got off of work. She is younger than me. I'm the oldest. She has a cognitive disability as well as autism. So after work, I just try to keep her active and keep her in programs. So she has day hab and respite. And then I'm trying to look into other programs to put her into. But other than that, she's definitely active with ice skating and horseback riding. I'm her guardian, so she lives with me right now at the moment, little sisters. So
like literally right there with you in the same room. What's your sister's name, Kimra?
Soraya.
You forgot gymnastics.
She said I forgot gymnastics. So she does gymnastics as well.
Thank you for reminding us, Thorea. Thank you. Lisa, how about you? Do you want to share with us?
Sure. Yes. And my situation is a little bit different. So I'll talk about Terry, my older sister. She actually died when I was 13 and she was 15. But, a good bit of my childhood was wrapped around her. She had physical disabilities, so also a little different from some of what we've heard. Intellectual, same as, normal, or however you say it. I'm sorry if that's not the right way, but she went to regular school mainly. She started out in a special school in Florida before they had a way to have a little girl in a wheelchair go to a regular school. But that was her only, the barrier to regular school was her wheelchair. And if there were steps, then she couldn't be in the school building. So that's it. So kind of a long time ago, also older than 50. But I've got some thoughts, so we'll continue on the conversation. Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, Lisa, I'm so sorry for your loss. And there's an expression, once a sib, always a sib in the sibling community, right? That you will always be connected to Terry, and you will always be part of the sibling community because of that. So thank you for being with us today. Callie, how about you? Would you like to tell us who your sibling is?
Sure. I have two younger siblings. One prefers to keep her life more private, though, so I'm going to talk about my little brother. He is a high school student, so that takes up a lot of his time nowadays. But he has autism as well as some behavioral issues as well. But he really likes to do like computer programming, so he has a lot of his summer time spent like computer camps and stuff like that. And he and I bond over like world building and all that kind of stuff, because we both really like that for his game. And he, oh, his name is Steven too. I don't know if I remember to say that.
I was going to ask what his name is. That's Steven.
Yeah.
Did you say that you have another sibling as well?
Yes. Yeah, they prefer to keep their information more private, but my little brother Steven is totally open to share his experiences, and he's very vocal about teaching others about about what he experiences and all that kind of stuff. So
that's great. Well, thank you for sharing us with him today. And Katie, last but not least.
My brother is Chris. He's 33 years old. He's a couple years older than I. We have a younger sister as well. We're all 2 years apart, very closely, which is interesting. He's really funny. He loves to just tell jokes, and he just says some of the funniest things, and he just loves to make people laugh. And he's kind of obsessed with movies. So if you even mention a movie, he's going to talk to you about that movie all day. And Pokemon, video games, that kind of stuff. He loves any of that like fandom stuff, Marvel, He loves to sing very loudly and obnoxiously, and he loves to pick on his sisters. He experiences Down syndrome. He currently lives in a group home. He has one roommate there, of course, working on like his cooking and other daily living skills. He has day hab where his staff is taking him out into the community. And then he goes home to my mom's house on the weekends. And of course, spends time with us throughout the week too. Yeah.
So you all live relatively close by.
Yeah. My mom and my brother and sister and I all live within like 15 minutes of each other.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Katie. The next question I'd love to throw out to the entire panel, and anyone can answer this first, just to think back to how you learned about your sibling's disability. So do you remember growing up, was there a conversation that you had with your parents or an experience that led you to understand that your sibling had a disability? Who'd like to share how you learned about your sibling's disability? Go ahead, Callie.
So I don't actually remember the conversation that happened. It happened when I was fairly young. But I did want to share a little bit about how there were moments when I started like going to other friends' house growing up and seeing how their siblings reacted at that same age, that it really clicked to you what it meant. Because, you grow up with your sibling, you're like, yeah, that's my sibling. That's just how they are. That's their personality. But if you go and see other people and their siblings that are the same age, you're like, whoa, that I actually can see a bit of a difference there. So I don't remember the conversation, but I can remember how I can kind of realize what it meant.
Yeah, so for you, it was more observing those differences outside of your family and outside of your home. Gotcha. Yeah, I saw a lot of heads nodding, right? That this feeling the same way, like, well, this is our baseline. This is our normal. Like, this is right. This is the only family we've got. So it was kind of normal to us until, maybe you see other families and recognize, oh, ours is a little bit different. My brother or sister is a little bit different. Would anyone else like to talk about how you discovered that your sibling had a disability?
So, just like, is it Kaylee? It's the same. It was the natural being an advocate for my sister growing up. So then that's when I realized she has a disability, and then started going to the hospital visits and going to meetings at school, which I didn't know exactly what the meetings were. I thought it was the regular student teacher meetings, but then finding out later, going to college and then going to school with her and getting, the one-on-one with the teachers that she has a disability.
And Kimra, you say that, you always have been kind of an advocate for your sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of through that advocacy, you sort of realized that she had a disability, that there was something.
Yes.
So what did that advocacy look like, like before you kind of knew what was going on?
Mostly it started with helping her around the house, constantly, because, she is smaller than me, or the youngest. So it's she depended on me for a lot of things. And then I've noticed that she would call me for majority of the things, or, I would go pick her up from school. And besides that, if people are different, going to school, kids would pick on you. So with that a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Talked about, how siblings are kind of natural born advocates. And how old were you, would you say, when you had a diagnosis or when you could like put a name to what was happening?
I would say around high school, so maybe my sophomore year in high school. That's when I, became more hands-on and wanting to know what was going on, because I would have to stay back a lot of times. Most of the time I would take her with me actually once I found out. And, that's how I built my relationships, because if I can bring my sister around, then you won't see me there. So.
And I see a lot of people nodding in acknowledgement that, we really do kind of use our brothers and sisters as a litmus test for who we want to keep around in our lives and who we want to let in. Because if you're not going to treat my sibling the way I want you to treat them, you're not going to, as you said, I'm not going to be there. We're not going to have a relationship. So
Right.
Thank you for sharing that, Kimra.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to share how they discovered? Go ahead, Ben.
Sure. So being, so much younger than my brother, I obviously, the people in our lives have already been around him and already had that kind of interaction and knew that he had a disability. Whereas I was coming up, and then I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I finally came to realize that there was something, he was different than other kids that were his age. And so the conversation was then with my parents, okay, well, why is he different? And we had that conversation about, we're not going to treat him different, but there is something different with Brad. And so everybody else is going to, you might see some things that don't make you happy. You might get some experiences that are awkward or things like that. But that was kind of about the age where I kind of realized there was something going on. And then my mom had that conversation with me about, hey, this is where we're at, and this is how we handle it.
Yeah. And do you remember what word she used? Like, did she say intellectual disability, or do you remember what word she used? Because you were like 7 at the time, right?
Yeah, I don't really recall the conversation. I know it was about them, but I don't remember what word she used or what my actual question was. But I do remember like that was when I kind of came out and realized that, hey, there's something going on here. Why is it like this, and what's going on? And I think too, my siblings, thinking back, my 2 older siblings kind of were prepping me for that beforehand, and I didn't even realize it.
Prepping you in the sense of like how you interacted with your sibling, or like prepping you how?
Prepping me for the social, prepping me for when we were out in public, when we were having social interactions, when we were having family gatherings, when we were having all that kind of stuff. They, your older siblings, at least in my family, my older siblings were either trying to show me or teach me how to do things, either by their examples or by their words and their actions, but they were showing me how we interacted with everyone. And especially when it came to Brad, how that interaction usually occurred. And right. I would say my sister was more of a protector than my older brother. Like, she was way more protective of Brad than my older brother was. They kind of had that brother sibling rivalry thing kind of going on, where my sister was more of the protector. And so she was always kind of like, this is what you need to do. This is how we handle these situations and whatnot.
Gotcha. So like a crash course in navigating the world with Brad.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Can anyone else remember back to what it was like to kind of figure things out? I mean, Lisa, you said that your sister used a wheelchair, right?
Right. So it was, just obvious, I think, right? It was different. So it was a visible disability. And so I just always knew, and I don't know, I can't really remember how old, but it just was always, because I was 2 years younger, it was just all I knew, really. And such a big part of our world. And she had a lot of surgeries. I remember she ended up in a little book about brave children years and years ago. And I remember that book said 16 major surgeries. And I don't know, and that was not all of them. She had more after that. So lots of surgery. So we were always in and out of the hospital, always, she was in casts a lot. And I actually don't know what the official, more medical diagnosis is. There were a range of disabilities, but the one that I always remember my mom telling me was twisted spine. And so something was wrong with her spinal column, and it stuck out in a way, and it contributed to her inability to walk. And so, she was always, part of my world, knowing that she was different.
Right. And do you remember, as a kid, so obviously a lot of hospital visits and surgeries, do you remember anyone explaining to you like what was going on, why she was going to the hospital? Do you remember being like scared about that or confused, or what was that like?
Yeah, I think I was always kind of curious about it, and it's hard to remember because so long ago. I feel like they were very general explanations, trying to straighten out her back a little bit, trying to get her legs a little straighter, just like that kind of thing. I know, yeah, just all like that, just very general, simple language usually.
Gotcha. Thank you, Lisa. And Kara or Kelly, do you want to talk about how you learned?
I can go. So I didn't really think my brother was that different than me, when we were really little. I know when he was born, he cried a lot, and he had a lot of seizures. So I didn't know that, of course. He just cried a lot, and he took all my parents' attention. I'm the oldest, by the way. So, my bossy edge is going to come out, But anyway, he took a lot of their attention, and my mom, my father was a psychiatrist. Okay, so I got to throw that out there. So there were a lot of like actual medical terms used in my house, like as a normal thing, right? So he had a lot of seizures and stuff, and they thought he was deaf and stuff, and I didn't really think he was different or anything was wrong with him, except I know this sounds weird, but I thought it was because he was a boy, right? So I said to my mom, if you have another baby, make sure it's a girl because these boys are hard.
Right. That was your only experience of a brother at that point, right?
Yeah. At that point, I was like, whatever, So then later on, we grew up, and of course, our neighborhood, we grew up in New Jersey, right? So, and this was way back in the 70s, in the early 80s. So people just really didn't like give you the time of day. Like we were treated like as if the other kids could like catch the disability off of either of us, right? So we had a lot of fun inside, and I was told, you're going to have to take care of him, and I need your help, to come home from school, and you're going to let him in, and he's going to come home from his whatever special school, which didn't even exist then. But mom found people who would teach him in a church basement and stuff. And, and then time went on, and, I did everything with him. I played with him. He couldn't go to school at one point because there was one person that said, the person couldn't go to school, right? He couldn't go to school either because they were like, we don't teach people with this disability, right? Then the law changed, and then they did, but at the same time, him and I had a lot of fun playing school together because I was like basically a nerd and like really bossy. So I'd be like, let's read this book. Let's do this. Oh, here's a chalkboard. I'm going to teach you how to read. So we did all this stuff, and it was really fun. And he became like a super duper playmate and friend, which he still is now, But the first time I was told anything different was when my mom went to get this, like, as it turns out now, we laugh at it, like super primitive, like genetic testing to figure out if like I might have a child with the same disability later on in life. So, they kind of broke it down for me. And my father, of course, used the words mental retardation, mentally retarded, and, like things like, because that's what they said back then and whatever. There was a big controversy in our home because my father was a psychiatrist. And at the time in New Jersey, you're supposed to send your family member to the institution, right? So that was how it was. And it was this big fight. Like my parents, my mom wouldn't do it, and my father wanted her to. And so it was this huge fight. And like, I just thought it was because, you have to go away if you're bad. right? And I was like, well, he's not bad. He hasn't done anything wrong. You know, he can learn, like watch him read. I taught him how to read this tiny little book, you know. So it was all right. And so anyway, she broke it down for me like that. And she was like, you know, the chances are very low that you'll have other children with this disability. And I was like, okay, great, fine, whatever, you know, kids, you know, at the time.
Yeah. How
and
old
then
were you when this was happening, Kara?
I don't want to say it was like puberty time, right? It was like that discussion along with all the others that you have at puberty time. And I don't know, I want to say, I don't know, maybe 12, 13.
Wow.
And then after that, I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, that's a lot for a 12-year-old, right?
Yeah. And no, I don't know. It was weird. We did everything together, though. I mean, I was, you know, they had very limited services. They didn't have any services back then. It was all just like get a babysitter or have, you know, me do it. Right. But they did have a summer camp there, which was kind of cool. They had a summer camp for people with disability. And he went to it. Of course, he was young. You know, we were both little, right? Like comparatively speaking, like I was old enough to go there and attend with him. But I remember this summer camp so clearly because it was like an overnight, you know, like it was at least a week, right? You go and you stay. And I was like, oh, summer camp, you know. And they said to me, you have to go with him because you have to help him while you're there. And you can camp too. And I was like, yes, you know. And then when we got there, it was all people with a disability were the campers, and they were all ages from like little kid all the way up to like grown adult. And people would dress up their adult like because it's a special day you're going to camp, you know. And I remember seeing like grown adults on the swing, you know, with the Down syndrome or whatever. And I'm looking at them and looking at them. I'm like, you know, they're a lot older than my brother, but it's pretty cool. They're swinging on swings. So, you know, like that's pretty great. And so I would participate in camp alongside with him. I swear to this day, I swear I was like the only kid that didn't have a disability at the camp, but I was supposed to take care of them. So there you go. Anyway,
And how,
I'll
and
shut
so
up now.
it sounds like you've a lot of the time you've been kind of his protector and his caregiver and his best friend.
Oh, I've had some schoolyard fights that back in the day in New Jersey, I always say it like this: life was cheap, right? And I kid you not, people would insult you right to your face. You know, they didn't want our family to be around anything or any of their property because somehow we would like emanate this like funk that, you know, would break their car or something. I don't know what to say, you know. But yeah, I mean, I had some schoolyard fights. I had to come out of my shell, and I had to, you know, just kind of situate myself with all that. And I don't know, I have too many stories. So,
Yeah, well, it's a great
you
segue
know,
to the next question. But first, I want to see if Katie and Callie, did you guys have a chance to answer that question about how you learned about your sibling's disability? Katie and Callie?
I did not. I don't really remember learning about Chris's disability, him having Down syndrome. I mean, there's physical features. And so it just was kind of known. And my parents didn't call it anything other than what it was. And we just, you know, treated him just the same. And he just needed a little bit more help. And it wasn't really until like when we had kids in the neighborhood playing and they would pick on him, you know, that's kind of when my advocacy started in kindergarten, getting in fights with kids for picking on him. And yeah, I just don't remember not knowing that he had Down syndrome and that he was different. But at the same time, I didn't think he needed to be treated any different. I mean, we still pick on each other and, you know, get in fights and,
and right. So there was no big sit down conversation about this is Down syndrome and your brother has it. And it just kind of was your reality.
Yeah. Just kind of the norm.
Gotcha. Thanks, Katie. And Callie, forgive me. Did you have a chance to answer this one?
I did. I think I'm the one that started
right?
the conversation.
Okay. This is what happens when you get old. You just lose it. Thank you all for answering that question. So much of what you said, especially Kara towards the end there, really is a great segue to my next question, which is about, when you think back to your experiences growing up with your brother or sister with a disability, in addition to your other siblings in some cases, but focusing on your sib with a disability, were there any special challenges that you encountered as a result of having a sibling with a disability, whether it's with friends or in your own family, within your own, home, challenges with your parents, or maybe how you felt about, the amount of attention your sibling received out in the community? So many of you have talked about what it was like, especially back in the day when there was so much less information about things like autism and intellectual disability, and so much stigma and fear, which still unfortunately exists today, but certainly 30, 40 years ago, even more pronounced. So just thinking about that, what kind of special challenges, relationships, friendships in school, just thinking about all different areas of your life, is there, something that kind of sticks out as being, kind of a hurdle that you had to pass over?
I'll go ahead here. So you had asked about how many other siblings, and I was second oldest. Terry was the oldest, then me, then my younger brother, and then baby sister. So 4 children. But I was the closest to Terry, being the closest to age. And, my little brother, he kind of did his own thing more. But my little sister, us 3 girls, we played a lot. We played all the time. And I was kind of a nerd and a homebody. So it kind of suited me to be there at home with Terry and Tracy, always playing. We like to do the same things. We love to play school. We love to play dolls, all these things. And I understood, that Terry had a lot of challenges in her life, and that life was hard for her. And I think I always kind of understood that, but not completely, because where the challenge comes in is that though I felt, we were close, I probably hung with her more than anyone else, I didn't have necessarily best friend. She was probably best friend. But all that said, I was terribly jealous of her. Just because she got so much attention, and she got the bulk of really my parents' attention. And, and I get it. Gosh, I'm a parent now. My kids are grown, but, being a parent is really hard work. When you're a parent of 4 children and one is in a wheelchair and needs a lot of attention, I get why that was, but I was really, I had really bad temper tantrums, and I'm thinking that was probably because I was just trying to get attention any way I could. I was really kind of an awful small child. I would pitch a fit over the smallest things at an age where most have grown out of it. I was still pitching fits. And my mom was really concerned about that. She thought, she had me diagnosed as something, I don't know, but, and she was worried that I would always have these fits, but I didn't really. I grew out of that. Even strangers, and because it was so visible with Terry, so this cute little girl in this wheelchair, strangers would just come up and give her something. I can remember we were at the Atlanta Zoo. I grew up in Decatur, Georgia, and we were at the Atlanta Zoo, and a man came up and gave her some money. I was like, what the heck? Why is she getting that money? And then relatives would would just send her presents. Like, even if it wasn't a holiday or something special, she would get special things. Seemed to me like all the time. And so I kind of knew she had a hard life, and understood that that's what this was about, but I couldn't help but be super jealous about all the attention.
Yeah, which is a pretty natural reaction, right? Especially for a kiddo who's, wouldn't mind having some of that stuff too. And the attention and the time and the effort on the part of your parents, that's very, very common. I see a lot of people nodding their heads to that. Anyone else want to respond to that, some of the challenges?
I don't, looking back on my life, I can't really recall any attention issues. My parents tried really hard to make sure that we all had attention that we needed. They found little things for us all to do. They certainly tried their best to make sure we all got what we wanted attention wise. But I think a biggest hurdle I think about when I look back is me wanting to help him, because I would see him having these struggles with, talking or doing these everyday things. And I wanted to find a way to help him. Like when he had occupational therapists over, I would try to learn from her to see how I could help him do better in any everyday things, because, that's my little brother. I'm the oldest sibling and wanted to help look after him. And I still do. I still try my best to help him in everyday little things, give him reminders like, hey, it's about lunchtime. Maybe we should try to go eat lunch or something along those lines. And another thing that wasn't as big of a hurdle, but it was something I certainly dealt with, not a whole lot, but I dealt with a bit, was social life with friends. My little brother and I have about 6 years apart in age, so we didn't go to school together. But around the time that I wanted to have friends over and wanted to have a bigger social life was around the time that I started really realizing what his disability meant. And so whenever I had friends come over, I would talk to them, hey, my little brother has autism. This is what it would mean. And he's no different. He's just a person. You don't gotta act all scared around him. You don't gotta be weird around him. He's totally just a person, trying to give him a little bit of a crash course on what it meant and what it would look like. And right around when I was entering middle school, I found a friend who had a little brother with this autism as well. Our brothers were the same age, we were the same age, and we became very close over that fact, just because we both know what it meant. And I'm really lucky to have my close friends today know what it's like, know what I go through, and they're totally cool with it. And, they do their best to accommodate me with my social needs as well. But those, I think, are the biggest two impacts that I can at least recall off the top of my head, is those two.
So kind of always being the helper, and then also finding friends who would understand the situation, which sounds like have done, which is going to be related to the next question for sure. And Callie, just so that I can kind of unpack this a little bit for folks who are listening, when you talk about the negative impact of helping, right? So obviously there's lots of good stuff, right? Like it feels good to help. You want to protect your brother. You love him so much. What is the negative impact of always being the helper? What was that like for you?
I think a big negative impact would be, and this is true for almost a lot of situations with me, is I try to help to a fault sometimes. I'll try to extend me no, I can help. Even if I'm tired or I want to say no, I still want to say that I can help. It's to the point where my parents are like, Callie, no, take a break. But I would always try to help. And if I couldn't find a way to help, I would feel bad. And people reassure me, no, it's totally fine. You did your best. And I would still feel a little bad that I couldn't help, even if I know that I tried my best too. I think those two are big impacts on, being the helper. And, those are big negative impacts that happened.
Thanks, Callie. Anyone else want to talk about some of the challenges?
I'll speak. So growing up in an active duty military household, I would say maybe high school when I first found out, and you're wanting to go and play with your friends or just get out the house. I wanted to do sports. And, with us being so close in age, I was responsible to bring us home after school and do the after school stuff until my parents got home. So that hindered me from participating in a lot of school activities. But with that, it switched over to adulthood now, where I chose to be her guardian. And now it's me finding time for myself, because I want to make sure she has all the resources and all, find out all the information to make sure I could make sure she stays on the right, stay on the right track. So now it's just making sure I find time for myself. And that's very important, to make sure you can care for your loved one or sibling. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, Kimra, you're your sister's guardian. She lives with you. I mean, lives are very, very much, intertwined. And so
yes.
when you talk about making time for yourself and putting your own needs first, like what does that look like for you? Or what's, how is that a struggle maybe still today?
Well, it's a little bit of a struggle, but sometimes I try to turn it into a fun situation. So a lot of times I sit down like, hey, do you want to go on vacation? Where do you want to go? Trying to make it interesting, not only for me, but for her as well. So we both would have fun. So even Chena Hot Springs sometimes, or, I found out that I qualify for respite. So I definitely use that. If, she says, I don't want to go with you to do this, I do plan like a little sleepover for her and use the respite care there.
Excellent. Respite is there's never enough of it, but we so appreciate it. We really, really treasure respite. So good for you for finding that. Other challenges that people want to speak to if you haven't had a chance yet? No?
There's
Okay.
definitely a handful of challenges, of course. A lot similar, coming home every day after school to take care of my brother, similar to Kimra, and always being in that caregiver role. And I think one of the biggest challenges was being kind of a perfectionist and always wanting to help and that kind of thing. I definitely set my own challenges aside, like my mental health and things that I needed if I was struggling in school. It wasn't things that we talked about. I definitely kept those things from my parents to not make things harder for them, because they had their hands full already. So I think that's the biggest thing that the biggest challenge that I experienced was just, not getting to do those things that everybody else is doing, and then not advocating for my own needs. Too busy advocating for his.
Yeah, absolutely, Katie. And is that something that you find carries into adulthood today?
Yeah, I think
not
I do
always being able to address your own needs.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's even though like I'm not as focused on his needs anymore, it's something that I still struggle to put myself first, or I'm always worried about what other people have going on. So it's definitely, I have to really push myself to work on my own stuff.
Right. Well, maybe you and Kimra can go to the hot springs together. So
I'm supposed to be there in 2 weeks. I'll call you.
Oh, nice. All right. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I want to flip the switch now and think about the silver lining. So like you guys really, talked about some of the challenges, and, even in talking about challenges like true siblings, you talked about a lot of the silver linings as well, right? But let's ask about that. Like, let's talk about, any of the good stuff that you experienced as a result of your sibling. You've all kind of alluded to some of the good stuff. What thoughts come to your mind when you think about the silver linings, the good experiences?
I think a huge silver lining that I've experienced is I am a very empathetic person and have a lot of perspective on the situation. So if we're going out in public and I see a child maybe having a meltdown, my first thought isn't, oh, that child has issues, or oh, that parent is awful. I'm like, oh, they might be overstimulated, or they might be hungry and not know how to express it. And I'm a lot more empathetic towards situations like that. I also like to think it helps me become a better problem solver. So I'm always trying to look for new ways to work around barriers like that, because, I have a lot of experience with that. If, say I am trying to get a hold of this customer at work, I'm like, okay, email doesn't work, let's call, just trying to figure out some way to get to my end goal that way. A lot of flexibility, both in patience and a lot of stuff. There's certainly a lot of skills that I've learned from being a sibling that I've adapted to my everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like too, you kind of know when to not sweat the small stuff, right? Like you have different perspective on what is small stuff and what's worth, really stressing about, and what's just, we're going to just move forward and solve this one and move on. So yeah. Thanks, Callie. Other positives? Ben, do you want to speak to some of the positives?
Sure. I think there are so many positives when it comes to being a sibling of somebody that has special needs. I think one of them, sometimes we say, and it's a challenge as well as a positive, and is that reality about growing up a little bit faster and having conversations that might be a little heavy, but I think at the end of the day, sometimes that it turns out to be a good positive. Not necessarily for me, but my sister, growing up in our household, our older brother had special needs. Well, she has a child that has special needs of his own. And so she was prepared her whole life to have that child. And she's a great mom and didn't have to go through a lot of the struggles because of her experience growing up with Brad. And so I see that for her as, one of the things that definitely a positive in her life was Brad being able to teach her and not having a lot of the newness of having someone in your life that has special needs. For me personally, I think it's allowed me to connect with a lot of people, not only other individuals that have family members with special needs, but individuals with special needs themselves. As an individual, I'm not scared to talk to somebody because they're different, and that applies across all spectrums, not just special needs. And so it's one of those things that just it's something I learned from a young age, and so I can do it now, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah. And it's funny, we talk a lot in the sibling universe about, what the research tells us about many siblings going into helping fields, right? And, you're an example of someone who went into a different field, like you're a CPA, right? But here you are, here you are doing the audits for Stone Soup, and here you are with us today. And, I always say, like, we just can't help ourselves as siblings. We might not be in a helping field, but we find ways to give back, and to kind of be those wonderful siblings that, that we know we can be. And so I think that, your story is such a great example of that. And
there's so many organizations across Alaska that have, that can impact siblings, and there's just a lot of opportunity out there. And I think as a sibling, I take advantage of those when I can. When I can do it personally, I do it. And whatever organization it is, it's helping those with special needs.
For sure. And it sounds like you connect that in your heart and in your mind. You connect that to your experiences with Brad. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else? Kimra.
All right. So I definitely want to say that growing up, or, my whole life, I've definitely learned patience. I've learned to be an educator, I guess, in a way. Like my sister, I love her to death, and she is like the greatest study partner right now with me going back to school for my doctorate degree. So with her asking a lot of questions, I'm like, I got the answer. I'm going to tell you, this is what it means. This is what it means. Even though she might not understand, it's helping me help her. So, and then with that too is, with being a manager, I think just overall, it just helps with a lot of things for me, because growing up, like I said, military household, moving, it's definitely from bigger cities. I used to always say, I don't want to repeat myself, but now I find myself repeating myself constantly, not only for work, but home. So it's just, to me, I just look at it as being an educator as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Kimra. And you talk about just that beautiful relationship you have with your sister, and just how, you guys really have each other's backs, and that really, is a two-way street in a lot of ways. And to the point that she's helping you, supporting you through this experience of going for your PhD. Typical overachieving sibling here going for a PhD, but I'll just put it out there and say that. But yeah, so thank you for sharing that. Very, very nice. Anyone else? The good stuff?
I'll just echo what others have said. I mean, I feel like it, at heart, it made me a much better person. I described the challenges before, but I also said she was, really my best friend. And I wouldn't wish such a hard life and such a painful life on someone. But gosh, I'm so much the better for having had her in my life. And I feel like I do see people in different ways and am comfortable to talk to people from all different walks of life that others may not be. So I'm grateful for those part of it, and I hold on to it. And while our family had lots of challenges, I would say we were much closer as a family. We kind of had her, she was kind of the center. And I think today people are more aware of not doing that as much maybe, but for our family, it worked in some ways that we became closer, I think, because of that. And the difference was even, having someone different in a way, this also might sound kind of weird, but it made me almost a little proud. Like you'd walk into a restaurant and everyone would look and I'm like, yeah, they're looking at us. So I don't know, that probably sounds weird. And that's from the perspective of a small child who doesn't really know anything. But I do remember feeling, I kind of liked that people looked at us in a weird way because others might be embarrassed, but for me, I wasn't. But overall, I cherish and treasure, and I'm grateful for all that she brought to me.
Thanks, Lisa.
Just to kind of echo everybody too, is just it kind of shaped who I am as a person. I mean, that patience and understanding and empathy and just being able to accept everyone the way they are. And then of course it led me to where I am now as far as my job and being able to support other families who have kids with disabilities and having my own perspective to bring to the table of what challenges we had and how that could make things easier for another family. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is that I bring my experiences with him into my job every day. And I definitely wouldn't have it any other way.
That's great. And I'm sure the families you work with really see that genuine being there with them and meeting them where they're at and not judging and really kind of understanding a lot of where they come from and appreciate it. So Kara, how about you? Do you want to silver linings? I know you've talked about some of them, but others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Definitely the ability to have empathy and be interested in education. I went to grad school and became an educator, a master's in education. Just working with my brother as a young kid and playing with him because I was trying to teach him how to read really early. So I ended up reading really early myself and doing all sorts of stuff that you don't do before you get to kindergarten or when you're there. It was kind of like, so I became a little bored in school, and they didn't have like gifted or whatever programs back then. They just put you up a grade. So I got put up 2 grades because I was practicing with him constantly, So there was that. And definitely the psychology of the stare. I appreciated the comment about getting stared at all the time. We got stared at all the time. And so it gave me a lot of confidence of being like, oh, you're going to look over here? Well, don't just look, stare, but just have this big kind of like persona, and be artsy, be different, which has been my thing. And to be proud of that. I although my parents did break up over one of the essential things, which was not having my brother go to an institution, my mother put a lot of things together to assist us that were just kind of informal supports and things like that. But one of the things that they did was make me the very best parent I could be for the kids I do have, because I do have the 2 boys with autism and they have the labels of severe, profound, blah, blah, blah. So there you go. If I didn't have this upbringing, I'm not sure that I could do exactly what I do now. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, because nobody's perfect. And somebody before said they still tease their brother. I still tease my brother. I teased him back then with all the authority and obligation of his evil older sister. Nobody was immune from that. But anyway, he really made me, I don't know. It's like at the core of my being, I'm a caregiver and I'm an advocate, and I just have a hard time putting those words together. But there just is no separation of that from me. So it's just been a really deeper understanding of life, which I really appreciate. So
Yeah, thanks for that. I thought of you when Ben was talking about his sister. And you talk to siblings, and sometimes siblings who are younger siblings who are looking to the future and thinking about having kids, some of them say, gosh, I just don't know if I had a sibling with the same thing that my brother or my sister has. I don't know if I could handle it, knowing I'm also going to be his or her caregiver as well. And then you have other siblings who say, well, if anyone in this world is going to have a kid with a disability and be ready for it, it's going to be me. So, it's just very, people are, in different places on that. And it's so nice to hear just how your role as a caregiver, Kara, and I feel like like anyone on this panel really, it just is who you are. It just is the lens through which you view the world, and the way that you interact with the world, right? Is just the mind and the heart of a caregiver, of someone who cares for other people, like literally cares about and for other people, which is, I think, kind of a lovely way to think about it. So thank you for sharing that. Did everyone have a chance to answer this one? The good stuff? I think so. All right. So now we're going to look into the crystal ball. We've talked a lot about the past, but as we segue towards the end of our time together, I want you to look into the crystal ball to the future. And so when you think about the future, your future and your siblings' future, what comes to mind? And Lisa, for you, maybe this is how you plan to continue to honor your brother's memory. I'm sorry, your sister's memory, Terry's memory. When you think about your experience together on this earth and continuing, to honor her legacy, what does that look like for you? And for everyone else, what do you see when you look down the road in the not too far future? Ben, you've already talked about how, you and your family are having some of those conversations. I don't know if any scenarios have come to mind through those conversations, or what you think your role might be. You've got other siblings.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. So the conversation, like I said earlier, it started when we were younger, and I don't think necessarily it was even my parents that started that conversation. That was just a conversation between my older brother and my sister and I about what was going to happen with Brad. Because as a kid, you're talking about what you're going to do, where your career, your dreams, your other things going down the road. I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be an NBA player or whatever. And then it's like, okay, well, where's Brad going to be? And so we've had that conversation, and it's kind of a hot topic because my sister really wants to fill that role. She's been kind of the protector and wants to fill that role. But my brother and I step back, and it's like, okay, well, that's great. You want to fill that role, but you have so much on your plate already. Brad, what does Brad want? What does Brad need? And who's going to be able best to provide that for him? We all left Idaho. None of us live in Idaho anymore. So our conversation is, okay, well, where's Brad going to be able to transition to the easiest? What's going to make him the happiest? And what state has the best, best ability to meet his needs? And so that's where we're at in the conversation. And honestly, I think it's probably a 10 or 15 year before we actually have to make a decision. And so it's kind of just the prep stage is getting everybody kind of ready, because my life's going to be a lot different in 15 years when, I've got some of my kids out of the house, but still a teenager. And same with my sister. She'll have her other kids out of the house, but still have one at home if things all work out and things like that. So it's a, crystal ball. We're all trying to, just kind of prepare for that day so we can have the real conversation. Okay, now the rubber's meeting the road. What are we going to do?
Yeah, thanks for being, so honest about that, and the different roles that your different siblings play, and a lot of siblings who grow up just with two, one sibling with a disability, one without. I think kind of, think, wow, if there were only more siblings, we could just all split it up equally and it would be great. But it's rarely that easy, right? There's usually, it's always complicated regardless of what the family dynamic is. But it's so great that you guys are having these conversations and starting to prepare, because the reality is, to get involved into any kind of service system, as we all know, because many of us work in it or we're auditing it or whatever, there can often be a wait. So, plans do need to be talked about and to some extent put into motion now for when we are going to need them. So yeah, thank you for sharing those conversations that you guys have been having.
Yeah.
Because it reminds me of some of the things. It was always assumed by my mom that Chris has a disability, he has Down syndrome, he's going to live with her forever. When she's gone, he's going to live with me. My younger sister, yes, she's our sibling as well, but she's always been more hands-off. I've always been the caregiver for him. And she's always kind of done her own thing. She's the baby, she's kind of spoiled, but she's just, it's assumed she's not going to be the one, and I am. And so, I definitely make a lot of my decisions of what I'm going to do with my life based on him and where he's going to get services. And, if I leave state, will I have to move back? Will I have to move him? Like, it's all things that I've considered. And the reason I'm still in Alaska, honestly, we've talked about leaving so many times, and it never happens. And he's definitely the reason. So I kind of came to terms with that at a young age. It just kind of was a thing. When I started working in the field, I was like, my mom was kind of getting to the end of her rope. She was really burnt out, and I was like, look, the group homes are an option. Chris is, all he wants is to live in his own place with a roommate. So this is that for him. It's going to give him more independence. It's going to give us more independence. And it was really hard for her, but it ended up being really good for her and for him. And so that's helped take some of that burden off of me, because I know that there are services that can help, and that he's not going to have to live with me. And then I do still plan to take guardianship over in the future. So that'll be something that we figure out. Yeah, I definitely think it's interesting that it's always just kind of been an expectation. Definitely one of the challenges that I've gone through is that it has been assumed of me. Yeah, I'm okay with it now.
Yeah, now that it sounds like now that there are other options, and it doesn't have to fall so much entirely on you. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Other crystal balls that we're looking into?
Well, in my crystal ball for the future, I definitely want to make sure I keep open communication with my sister and her wants and needs, and because she is an adult, want to educate her on her rights. So I can provide, the needs that she wants, or, you know what I mean? And, she has expressed to me, she wants to live on her own. So that's things I'm looking into. She wants to start her own business as an entrepreneur, and her older sister, trying to give her what she wants. We're going to work together and create her own little business, because she loves to sew doll clothes. She has like her collection of dolls and she makes clothes for them. So to continue trying to sell that to the world. So far, she had like a few sales at a local store. So just, keep trying to encourage her and promote her and let her know she's not any different than anyone else. She just needs a little bit of help. So I'm going to keep doing that.
and also do your PhD and move forward with that, right?
Yes, definitely.
Thanks, Kimra. Kara, or Lisa? Lisa.
I'll just mention, my mom and I always talk about like, what would Terry be doing, and it's, of course we don't know, but I do like to think about her and think about what she would be doing. And I don't know if she'd live on her own or not. My mom and dad ended up divorcing after she died. And it wasn't the kind of thing where having the challenge of a disabled child, was too much for the marriage. It was, I think my dad actually stayed in the marriage much longer because of Terry, because they really weren't the right couple from day one, probably. But when and she was the oldest of four, so he really, and good for him, he stuck with it. If she stayed alive, would they have continued on? And my mom had been in this unhappy marriage. I mean, my mom's really happy it ended too. So she's like, well, my mom's got her own good life, but I do think about Terry and her working like maybe she would have her own little business making things, or maybe she'd work in an office and maybe she would have been on her own. I just feel like she could have done a lot of things, and I love thinking about that. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for keeping her memory alive. Such a great way. Kara?
My crystal ball is cloudy. So, okay. Our parents died in 2019. Both our mom and dad died. And my mom, our dad wasn't so much involved because, like I said, they were divorced, but he wasn't so much involved. But our mom was for years and years and years. She did all the stuff. And I had to actually kind of fight with her to become co-guardian at one point. And thank God I did that, because her death was sudden. And if, anybody wants to talk with me about the details of what all happens when somebody dies and it's sudden and da 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 da, I could talk about it. I mean, I won't get into that here, but anyway, I was really happy that at that time, years ago, I had this conversation with her and said, someday you're not going to be able to do all this. And somebody has to make sure that his rent gets paid and all this other stuff and stuff like that. And so anyway, we did that. And so my biggest takeaway there is if there's a sibling out there who's thinking about these conversations, just to have them as early as you can. My mom was all like, I don't want to bother you with all this because of you, and you have your kids and you're busy and you have your work and da 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 da, right? I don't want to bother you with it. So I was like, okay. And then later on, my mother developed Alzheimer's, right? So she couldn't do it either, So it was kind of like this thing. And then she passed from Alzheimer's, which was a whole nother caregiving segment in my life. I want to just, I was caregiver up here and caregiver down here and caregiver on the side. And so my crystal ball really is I really know a lot about benefits now. I really know a lot about services. My brother did used to live with me until I had my kids, and I realized I couldn't do all that. I mean, I had this two little boys with autism and their older uncle. Nowadays it's easier because they get together and they have a lot of fun together because the boys are older. They can actually relate a little better, right? So that's really cool. My mother had me to be all up in her business and say, hey, mom, you need to do this, you need to do that, and then have her tell me, no, it's a bother. But then I fixed everything after she died anyway, right? Because I had that one thing, co-guardianship, right? And then, with co-guardianship, I would say, I mean, you don't have to be their guardian at all, but family's good. Family's the best, right? Because they're going to care the most. And the other thing about it is co-guardianship is pretty great, because what if happens to you? What if something happens to you? You know what I mean? And you can't do it. So my mother had me. I don't have a me. I just have the two boys, and they have autism, and they're not going to, they direct their life. Don't get me wrong. But as far as everything else goes, and they live with us, and I know that there's group homes, and I know that there's this, that, and the other thing. I get that. It's just that for long term, how can I get them the opportunity to have a really good life? Because by the time I was 22, I had gone to England and I came back, and how can I get them some more experiences in their life? How can I figure out where to go if we're not going to stay in Alaska forever and a day, which I don't really feel like I want to, for on their sake too. And mostly it's like, how can I find somebody who cares about them enough to become a co-guardian early so that I can die in peace and not feel like I have to come out of the grave and haunt people, is like direct them from beyond, I mean, I get it. Like it's a giant thing for us, right? What are you going to do when you're dead? What are you going to do when you're dead? What am I going to do when I'm dead for them? I don't know that my brother will like live longer than me because of those challenges that he does have. That's really sad, but he's set, so anyway, I think right now my biggest thing in the crystal ball is like, I got to find some people who care. So I do have relatives that are like on the East Coast. I got this little set of relatives that were really friendly with my mom and, Brian and everybody, and they remember him, and they're getting old too, but they have children who are my cousins. And they have children, and some of their children have autism. So they're younger, but I toy with the idea of calling them up and saying, hey, do y'all mind if I like target you for guardianship for later? But other than that, I just don't have anything. I don't have much right now. So I just keep on going, and just deal with the regular transitions and stuff like that. So
Yeah. So more questions now than answers. Yeah. Thanks, Kara. And Callie, I think you're the last one to answer this question about looking into the crystal ball and seeing, is Callie back? Oh, there she is. Good.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, my internet was flipping out a little bit. It's good now. But yeah, looking into the crystal ball, is certainly something I've talked about with my family. We're all of us as kids are a bit younger. I'm the oldest, being only 21. But we've still talked about being a co-guardian for my little brother, just in case, something does happen and I can help out. Especially with working with Hope, I can also have a little bit of leg up in that area as well. Looking further into the future, we're all really hoping, he can be as independent as possible. He's learning stuff every day. Like he knows enough to make himself ramen right now, which he thinks is really awesome that he can make himself food. But I have thought about, hey, if maybe at some point in my life, I can take him in if it needs to be. But I've never felt like I've had to. I've never felt like that's the role in my life, is to care for him when we all get older. But I've thought about it, like if I need to be there for him, I absolutely can. I know how to help him. I've grown up with him. And so I appreciate within myself that flexibility, like I can, if we need to, I can help him in that regard. But I also feel like I want to have a family someday, and I also feel like I want to have kids someday. And I do feel like what I've learned has helped prepare me to have kids in the future. Because I'll feel like I'll be more flexible and empathetic towards them. And I've thought about adopting kids with special needs, because I know that there's a huge population of kids who need families that have special needs because of families not knowing how to deal with it. I've also been studying sign language for like 7 years, so that also could help go into it as well. But I've certainly thought about, I'm able to help him if he needs it, but we're hoping that he can be as independent as possible in the future.
Thanks, Callie. We have just a few more minutes left, and I just want to invite our audience members to type questions into the chat if you have questions for any of our panelists. Now is a great time to put those into the chat. Excuse me. And if there's no other questions, I'll just ask one last one. So we have both parents and professionals here watching the panel, and I'd love to just ask you guys, we'll do a super quick lightning round. If you could offer one piece of advice to parents and professionals as to how they can best support siblings, what would that one piece of advice be? And we'll just do a lightning round. Callie, can we start with you? I'll just call on people in the name of time.
Absolutely. I think a huge advice to be for parents and professionals is don't assume what the sibling needs. And every sibling is different. Every dynamic is different. Sometimes the oldest sibling, is a bit more independent. Sometimes the oldest sibling really wants to help. Sometimes, it's best to try to talk to that sibling to say, hey, do you want to be more hands-on with your sibling? Do you want to be more hands-off with your sibling? Try to talk with them about what they want their role in the life to be. It's best not to assume. I've been grateful that I fit the role that I have very well, and I'm very happy in it. But every person is different, and every sibling is different.
Very well said.
And I did also want to mention, in this quick fire round, that I went to sip shops as a child. And yeah, exactly. I met people who were going through something similar and made friends through that. And I feel like that also helps me gain a better understanding of, how to help my brother, and that it also gave me an outlet to be my own person and to explore a little bit independent that way too.
Thanks, Callie. Ben, how about you? One piece of quick advice for parents and professionals who want to support siblings.
Your siblings learn from your example. So however you treat that person is exactly how they're going to learn it when they're little, and that's how they're going to do it through life. So just be a good example.
Thanks, Ben. Kara, how about you?
For parents and professionals, I would say, even though a person is a sibling and they might be helping a lot, don't forget that they need help too sometimes. A lot of times just going through all these different plans and, all the different things that I do is kind of like, yeah, it's her, she'll do it, bam. And then I don't really get a chance to, get the same help that I know other people are getting. So, realize that we also need help too in different ways. And also just to honor us as the longest lasting relationship that the person who experiences a disability is likely to have, and that's if we're lucky and everyone lives long and, help us to support us and make us be, included or help us be included.
Thank you, Kara.
Basically that.
Thank you. Lisa, parting words of wisdom.
Just make one-on-one time for all the kids, each one of the kids, the one with special needs and the ones without. And, my friends now, some of them do kid dates, and I love that, so make time to do that special thing, even if it's just a walk or coloring or whatever it might be.
Thank you, Lisa. And Kimra, parting words of wisdom for our professionals.
I would definitely say to be open, transparent, and creative. Like was said earlier, everyone is different in their own relationships. So if you need help, just ask. You never know, someone out there might get help. Transparent with what you want to help with, so there isn't any misunderstanding, and just creative in every single thing that you do, from having conversations to activities. Just be there.
Thanks, Kimra. And Katie, we'll close out this question with you. One piece of quick advice for parents and professionals who want to support siblings.
Don't forget about us. Involve siblings when you can. I one of the things that I found really valuable that Emily had mentioned in our sib shops training was, involving the sibling in appointments and things like the IEP meetings, because we have a different perspective than the parents do, even, especially if we're the ones that are at home taking care of them after school. We know what they can and can't do. So sometimes that could be really valuable information in supporting them as well. So.
Sure. Thank you, Katie. Well, I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for sharing your time and your stories and your inspiration. A comment in the chat, no questions, but everyone here is so inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I'm humbled and amazed and coming away with a lot of good stuff for my kids. So a lot of thank yous, a lot of gratitude in the chat. I do want to mention, as Katie knows, that there is a sister organization to the Sibling Support Project called the National Sibling Leadership Network. Kimra is familiar with this organization. I've been planting the seed with Katie and Kimra about starting an Alaska chapter of that national organization. I see thumbs up. I see some really great folks here who might be interested in connecting. Just the power of siblings connecting is so gratifying and helpful. And I hope you guys have gotten a lot out of today. Thank you so much again to Stone Soup Group for putting this together, for giving us the opportunity to highlight your stories. It's been really, really great. And I'm also humbled and very, very grateful. So thank you all. Turn it over to you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Emily, and to the whole panel. Thank you so much for joining us. That was really awesome. So often the perspective of the sibling gets overlooked. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your stories and to be so honest about your experience and what it was like for you to grow up in a family with a child who had special needs. And for me as a parent, it definitely kind of makes me think about what my children's experience was like, and to maybe be a little more considerate of the child who comes across as bratty or spoiled or right, that there might be some other things at play there, and to maybe be a little more considerate. But yeah, thank you all so much. So this concludes today's part of our parent conference, but we will regroup again on Thursday at noon. So we hope you can join us then as well. Thursday's session is with Rain Vandenberg, who some of you might be familiar with, talking about effective communication with people experiencing disabilities. And then our afternoon session at 2 is with Haley Moss, who is an attorney with autism and talking about neurodiversity in the workplace. So really hope you can join us. And if you haven't registered already, you can do that on our website. But thank you all so much. It was a really great session today.